Good evening, everyone. It is a real pleasure to have Harris with us tonight. Harris is one of our best math tutors, and according to accounts from many parents and many students, one of our most engaging and most likable tutors. And he's going to be sharing a series of experiences, tips that have to do with engagement, with exam techniques, with different ways of keeping different children interested in maths and also in other subjects through certain tips that he's going to share with us tonight. Welcome, Harris.
Thank you very much, John. Very lovely introduction. Thank you very much for having me as well. So fantastic. Lovely to be a part on the Facebook Live tonight.
Thanks for joining us. And without further ado, I'd like you to first tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into tutoring in the first place.
Okay, so I'm Harris, one of the maths tutors at Bright Heart. I've been at Bright Heart for coming up to 3 years, no, 3 years this year. So the end of this year, I should be up to 3 years. So quite a bit of time. Well, if I could just explain how I got into tutoring from the start. When I was younger, I never really had any idea of thought of teaching related activities in my future curriculum career. The aim was to get a maths degree and go into investment banking or become an actuary. I know, really boring now I think about it. But it initially started when I was 16 and I nominated myself for a maths mentoring at my school. I worked with one of the students every Monday in the morning before school started, and we worked really well. His ability improved, and though it may have been an initial challenge in the beginning, I had realized that I would be making an impact to someone's life, and I had to take this seriously. And it gave me my best. It gave me the ability to become my best to make sure that they passed. And then the feeling of helping someone is amazing because they show you how grateful they are and how good that made me feel. It was really nice. That then when I was 18, I volunteered abroad in South Africa to teach primary school students maths, English, and physical education. Seeing how a school with poor circumstances provided education was inspirational. The teachers gave their all to their students and barely got anything back, and the students themselves loved the education and really put in their maximum efforts in focusing in getting the best out of the education and really working hard. And it was an emotional but rewarding experience. You could see how students would want to learn. They really wanted to be there. They wanted to make the most of it and go for it. So that was really inspirational on that side. And when I had to leave, when everything finished up, I was crying. I never thought I would be, but I was in tears, and it was great. I was happy about that. And then once I started university, I became a private part-time tutor. While I was studying for my degree, I was helping students in various locations, going to the houses, going to libraries, and working with them. And once that was quite a bit of a success, I had found Bright Heart, and I joined them in late January 2018. And so that's how I really got into tutoring.
Thanks for sharing that. You have clearly you have a passion, and you got a calling that led you to share your knowledge with so many students. And now you are also helping us in your role as tutor support. You try and reach out to other tutors, and you're also sharing your expertise with other tutors. And as you know, most of our students have some kind of special educational need. And I was wondering what led you to try and help students with some kind of SEN in the first place? What was it that led you to specialize in special educational needs?
Okay, brilliant. So, well, I never initially had any plans to help special educational needs. It wasn't my first inclination in my mind. My first SEN student was at Bright Art, and though I found it a challenge, I learned more as I delivered my lesson, and I had to adapt to their learning strategy, which is another word for us talking about a person-centered way of thinking. I had to find new ways to make a lesson engaging and productive. As I had never had any initial plans of working with SEN, I realized how much the education system may be challenging to fit their needs. And this made me want to do the best so I can provide my students with the best education possible. And even though we have come a long way for SEN as a society in general, in the last 60 odd years, we have come a lot way, providing for SEN and developing research and funding. But there is still a long way to go. And I want to help shape that. And I want to be a part of that. I want to, build something on that. And, if I can do my part in providing an education for SEN, and that's exactly what I want to do. Also, in 2019, in the summer, I done a maths internship at Queen Elizabeth, quite a prestigious school, one of the best in the country, as one would say. On average, 30% of the students would go to Oxbridge unis. The remaining 70%, the 70% of that 70% would go to Russell Group. So extremely academic and successful. Whilst working there, providing one-to-one and conducting a whole lesson of 25 pupils was an amazing, brilliant experience. I just felt the provision for them were optimal, and working previously on SEN, I just felt like it's something I wanted to do. It's something I wanted to go on, something I wanted to shape and build for the future.
This understanding of neurodiversity has led you to find different ways to support students with special educational needs, but students in general, I would say, can benefit from, I would call it the most crucial thing that we can teach any student, which is to learn to learn. And I wanted you to tell us a little bit about the different, the advice that you can share with students to get them to improve their study skills.
Okay, so of course, it's great that we can provide assistance and fill in the gaps where the schools miss it, where they miss in school. But it's also good to develop their study skills. As a tutor, you will only have 1 to 3 hours a week on average with the student. And that time outside of tutoring is what truly develops the student's ability if they go on to study and do the work. As a tutor, I realized that spoon feeding your student may help in the short term, but it doesn't set them up for what's to come ahead. Study skills such as note-taking, extracting the necessary information from the question to answer, it is a skill itself that needs to be developed by the students themselves. And as much as we can help, we must be mindful of allowing the student to think for themselves and solve problems on their own. Because down the line, they will probably go down to college or university. And if I could not only develop their maths, but also develop their ability to study on their own, then it's a win-win. As they get older, they would be required to do more independent study. So when I work on this, it's to build that foundation for when they go on to that future, they can access notes, they can research, they know how to research, they know how to take notes. So I'll give you an example. So one of the students I work with, one day we look at how to research for something you don't know. And I would say, pretend that I'm not here. We'll have a question on the board and it's a new topic, and I'll say, pretend I'm not here. What would you do? And they would, of course, wouldn't know what to do. They would say this and that. And I would say, look, I want you to research, and I'll show them how to research. I'll give them the insight on how to do this, how to access information here and there. And then I tell them to look at techniques. In this, I use highlighters, ask students to highlight necessary information. And even though at the beginning they would highlight everything, and the whole paper looking like a pink neon strip of paint, I would work on this and develop their understanding of what necessary information can be extracted from a certain document. Many students are still developing their cognitive abilities in their age at that time. So, between those ages of growing up, developing themselves still. So it is the vital time to help them understand how to work on their own and conduct their own research. And I think that's really important. Generally, before I start a new topic, I would ask my student to research prior to that. So, for example, the next session was going to be on Pythagoras' theorem. I would ask to find out who this person is, what made them famous, write a mini summary of this, including the mathematical work that he presented or she presented, and try to make sense of it. In this way, when the next lesson is due and when we're actually going to start doing the work, the student is engaged as they have done the research prior. And it's not just working through worksheets, it's a research activity. And it gets their brain going and makes them curious into finding out what it is and how it works. And, when we do commence our lesson, we can move swiftly and efficiently, and it makes the lesson productive because I don't need to reiterate on certain facts. They already know it because they've done the research and they've done the homework, they've done the autobiography, and they have the information necessary presented to them. And therefore, when we do our lesson, it goes quite smoothly. So that's what I'd have for, improving study skills, really, is those kind of things.
Thank you. Thank you. Now, one of the aspects that can cause the most distress to students is exams. Is when it's time to take an exam. No matter how much practice you've had with your tutor and how many techniques you've mastered, when it's time to do a test, anxiety starts kicking in. Would you mind sharing a few tips, techniques that can be used for test-taking purposes?
Of course. So, we are in the exam season. It's May. A lot of students are sitting their mocks in school, and it's a stressful period, really, to be in. And I completely understand the overwhelming exams that can come all in one go. And it can have some effect on your mental capacity too. So currently, the most important thing I would say, just before I go into the exams, share tips and techniques, most importantly, it's good to stay hydrated and do as much exercise as you can to keep the brain stimulated. Be alert and sharp prior to an exam. Don't leave revision last minute or stay up all night trying to cram it all in. It won't work. It's never worked. Trust me, I've tried it before. Preparation is key. When coming to questions, read the questions a few times before answering. I've noticed sometimes when a technique is learned with a specific topic, students would often repeat the method for all questions without reading the question properly. They just want to rush into it and get it done over and done with. Sometimes a question can catch you off guard, so it's important to understand what the question is asking you to do and then plan on how you will get to your answer. If you have hit a dead end, then start to work on things you know about the topic. List particular points and numbers and try to make a match or ask yourself, how do I get from here to there? Then eventually you will come to it. I notice students give up when they hit a roadblock, and that's completely understandable. It's frustrating. It happens to me as well. So, I hit a roadblock, I want to give up. I felt like that, okay? When I do a tutoring session and a student has no idea how to do a question, I just read the question again. But I emphasize on the key parts of the question, and most of the time they go, and then proceed to do the question. So it's all about interpretation. These questions are supposed to be confusingly written. They want to challenge you. Now, I'm going to give you an example of how to answer a question and in more insight after this. So when there is a statement given for a long question, they generally give it in order. And of course, there are various ways to do your working, but for some particular questions, it's best to stick to the one they want. So follow and read the question, highlight key areas and figures, read the first statement, then work out what that single statement means. So let's have an example. Okay, so I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so this is Microsoft Whiteboard. It's something I use sometimes when conducting my lessons. It's really useful. You can use quite a few things on here, and it's very interactive in my opinion. So I'll try to make this as less boring as I can, but as I said in my statement before, that attack each statement one by one, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So let's read the first statement. So Robert makes 50 liters of green paint by mixing liters of yellow paint and liters of blue paint in the ratio of 2 to 3. Straight away, I know students would want to split this ratio, and that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to split this ratio accordingly. So we have 50, sorry about the bad handwriting, and we have the ratio of 2 to 3. So we split the ratio how we would like to do it. So 2 to 3, 2 plus 3 equals 5. Divide by my liter of paint. So I have 50 divided by 5, which gives me 10. Multiply the 10 back in with the ratios. 10 times 2, 20. And 10 times 3 equals 30. So this is your yellow paint. I'm going to highlight it yellow. And then this, oops, is your blue paint. Okay. Perfect. So we know that we're going to be using 20 to 30 liters of paint. So blue, yellow to blue. Next, attach the next statement. Yellow paint is sold in 5-liter tins. Each tin of yellow paint costs £26. So 5-liter tins cost £26. Now, what does that mean? So we know we want 20 liters of yellow paint right over here. And if one tin has 5 liters, then we're going to use 4 tins. So 4 tins at a price of £26. So £26 each. Perfect. Just going to leave that there. I'm not going to calculate that, even though it would be 50, 100, 106, I think, 102. I'm not too sure. My mental maths is not really working today. But we'll go on to that next one. Perfect. So next part is blue paint is sold in 10-liter tins. Each blue paint costs £48. So we know that our blue paint is 30. So we're going to have 3 tins costing £48 times by 48. Lovely. So we have got our cost right there. Okay, next statement. I read it and I answer it. Robert sells all the green paint he makes in 10-liter tins. He sells each tin of green paint for £66.96. So this is 10 tins multiplied by 66.96. Perfect. I've answered that part of the question. Final part. Work out Robert's percentage profit. Each tin of green paint he sells. So we know how to do that. we will just calculate the cost of this and then the cost of this, subtract them, then divide it by the original amount, and that will get our percentage profit. So I'm going to leave that because I don't have a calculator and this is a calculator paper. So this is how I like to look at questions, looking at each statement specifically, answering each statement. So read the whole question first, of course, go through all of this, and then look at each statement, answer each statement, and then eventually you'll realize you've got one big problem, but many small problems. And those small problems you can do when you hit a roadblock. Okay. Lovely. Perfect.
Thanks. That was a great example, and especially with that whiteboard, which can be used also during online sessions, right?
Of course, of course.
That has proved to be really successful. You are currently one of our busiest tutors. You have had a number of students over the years, and let's face it, maths is many times a dreaded subject. When we get inquiries, very often we get the idea that students have what we know as maths anxiety, or simply find it really challenging, and the idea of coping with maths in the first place is something that overwhelms many, many students.
Of course.
Tell me what advice you can give the students who feel maths anxiety or feel that they cannot cope with maths to begin with.
Okay. So I like to compare maths to a language. I would say it's the language of the universe. Many scientists would disagree, but they'll have to agree eventually. But I'd like to always give a scenario of how humans can't talk to animals. You know, we can communicate with our pets. We can tell them to sit, fetch, and basic communication, but we can't physically talk to them, our fur babies, on a language scale. I then suggest, what if an alien species was to visit, and how we would communicate? If we find it challenging to speak to beings on our own planet, imagine the complexity of another planet. And then I say maths is how we would communicate. Maths is the language of the universe. You know, if they have the ability to travel to galaxies, as silly as it sounds, but possible, then they of course know their maths. If we find it challenging in that aspect, and eventually we can come to that eventually. Sorry, give me one. Just like any other language you want to learn, you need to understand the basic principles and then develop understanding. Then you are able to apply yourself to that format. It's similar with maths. You need to spark your interest and prepare yourself, and always work on developing your understanding like a sculpture. So when an artist is sculpting, he's hacking away. It's not built in one day. It takes time. To perfect something like the art of maths, it takes a lot of time and study and dedication. If you cannot cope, then seek help until you understand. Be curious and ask constantly. Anything that doesn't make sense, raise your hand if need be, because it doesn't really matter. No one was going to judge you in the classroom because you're raising your hand. I know you want to be the coolest student in your school or classroom. You don't want to be the teacher's pet. You don't want to answer. But raise your hand. At the end of the day, you have a responsibility of completing your exams, your GCSEs, and you need to do what's necessary to understand. So ask away, understand, ask until you understand. And then that should help you. And anxiety, yes, it builds in itself. It can happen. I've come across students that have cried dealing with maths, and I remember their mother saying to me, she would be crying because she can't be dealing with it, and I came along and I helped her, and I built my rapport with her, and I calmly explained that it's possible. And, the tears went, which the mother was really grateful for. But most importantly, she started to enjoy maths because she started to understand it. When you start to understand it, you enjoy it, and the anxiety starts to disappear. So that experience of me working with another student who was very anxious with mathematics, eventually became familiar with it. And it takes a bit of time. I understand. I understand the pressures of school, the competitiveness of it all, and it can mount up a lot. So it is quite difficult. But if we work together, if we take our time with students, if we develop their understanding, build a good relation with them, don't just focus it all on maths, talk about other things too, and eventually their head will come around it, and you'll be good for go. So that's my real advice for maths anxiety is taking time, being curious, and it just takes a lot of time. So don't give up, be dedicated, and eventually your head will come around it. And once your head comes around it, you enjoy it. And you don't want to. I know a lot of students don't want to sound geeky, but I've had many students that hated maths but enjoy it now. So that's great.
You've mentioned not talking too much about maths, and I think that's one of the aspects of maths that makes it so challenging for many people. The fact that it's so intangible, that it's so abstract. Okay, so if we want to add a measure of tangibility to it, to make it, say, more relatable to everyday things, can you give us some examples very quickly of, say, hands-on activities, practical examples that you've used in the past to make it a little more relatable?
Of course. So I know eventually you will be seeing a written exam with pen and paper. That's the real purpose of your studies, is to go for that. That's the primary reason. Making it slightly challenging to have practical hands-on activities all the time is difficult, because you're only going there to sit an exam. And so if you have all this practical hands-on activity all the time, it's quite difficult. But it's useful in some ways. As some students are visual learners, this can be beneficial. So one of the techniques I like to use, for example, if you're working out the volume of a cylinder, I got one of my students to get hold of a Pringle can, empty Pringle can, and which is a cylinder shape, if no one knows, and asked to work out the dimensions to find the volume. So I would get the Pringle can. He would have the Pringle can, and because he's not looking at a piece of paper on the screen or on his desk, and he's not looking at something flat on 2D surface, he's got the actual live representation right in his hands. It engages his brain into finding the dimension. So I ask him to find the diameter, the height, all the necessary information to work out the volume. So using hands-on activities engages the brain more than just answering questions on a worksheet. It makes it more fun and interactive. Then, let's say, for example, surface area, different to volume. I would ask him or her to cut the cylinder into 2D shapes. So you've got the cylinder here. I wish I had a cylinder, but I don't. But yes, I asked him to cut using scissors. So more engagement. He's doing something with his mind. He's doing something with his hands. It's engaging him a lot, or her a lot. And this representation of 2D structures forming a 3D structure is what helps with working out your surface area. So when he cuts it open, he realizes there's 2 circles and a rectangle. It's more understandable for them to work out the area like that. So instead of just doing it on a piece of paper, having live demonstrations is useful. And using practical hands-on methods is good. It's engaging. Students are interested more. They won't doze off or anything. They won't just lose interest because they have to do something physically. And when you do physically something, you're accessing more senses in your body. Your brain is firing up, and I think that helps a little bit.
Thank you. Love that example. That's so much easier to understand, and otherwise completely abstract concept. We do have very little time left. In fact, we've pretty much run out of time, but I'd like you to share maybe an experience. It could be from online tuition, in-person tuition, something that you used to get the student engaged, to boost the student's confidence in the process.
Mm-hmm. So, you know, in the last year of lockdown, the transition from in-person to online tutoring really has mainly happened within the last year. And of course, it being new to me, you know, this last year was the first time I've done online tutoring, and you know, it was quite difficult. I didn't understand the concept of it. I thought it would. I just didn't think it would work, but it does. Eventually, you know, you can work your way around it. You can just see from the example I used from my whiteboard that it works perfectly well. In a way to improve engagement of students. So, you know, when I had one of my students last year for the first time, they had ASC, ADHD, and, you know, were on the spectrum. And engaging them was quite difficult online because I wasn't there in person. It was quite difficult. They would go on different tabs. They wouldn't be interested in the beginning. They'd lay in bed to do the lesson. There was nothing for them, and I just felt like, you know, if you get to know this, take your time getting to know the student first, showing them that you're not just there to just teach maths. You're there to have a great time, have fun. You know, build this relationship, build this rapport, and work through what's necessary. So taking your time, getting to know the student first, getting to know their interest before starting to work, I think is important, because it shows, you know, they want to know you care. They want to know you care about them. They want to know that you're interested in them, and that's the key thing there. So schools have quite an authoritarian presence in a classroom. I don't have that in my classroom. I like to treat my students like adults. Of course, you know, when boundaries are crossed, I address that, but I like to treat them like adults in a way that I don't want them to feel like kids. I don't want them to feel like I am higher above them. They have to listen to me. If there's anything they don't understand, I tell them, please shout it out. I'd like that. And I know it's easier, you know, 1-to-1 versus 30-to-1 in a normal classroom. But I feel like if you take away that authoritarian presence, if you work with them, talk to them, and build that relationship, then eventually they'll come around you, and you can do your lessons and they'll respect you. And then students' confidence boosts. You know, they do one little thing right on certain things. You tell them that's great. It's important to tell them that they're doing well. Helps boost their confidence, and it makes them work better as well. So that's how I really get them to improve engagement. So of course I use the real life examples, but you know, at the beginning it's hard to engage first, you know, especially when you have issues being online. You're not there physically, but it can come around it. You can come around it. And you know, now I've developed my skills for online tutoring, I know that I'm capable of doing that. So that's how I would do it there.
You have been able to reach to so many students indeed, and to keep them engaged. No wonder you're fully booked all the time, right?
Brilliant, yes. Can't take anything on now.
That was great. Thank you so much for sharing all this with us, Harris. It's a shame we don't have time for any more. I'm sure there are many more anecdotes and experiences you could share with us, but we have run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us today. And well, I hope everyone has a great night. Have a great night, Harris. And
have a great night too. Thank you very much for having me on board. It was a real pleasure to do this, and it's great. Thank you very much.
It was a pleasure for us. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, John.
Have a great night, everyone.
Take care. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.